Yippee-yi-yi,
Hello, my fellow readers. My name is Greg, and this is Ghost Readers in the Sky. It's time for the weekly roundup. What I've been reading, what I'm planning to read, what I've been posting, all of those reading and booktube-ish things. Let's start with what I finished reading this week. First of all, D.E. Stevenson's book, Anna and Her Daughters. This is a cozy novel, shall we say, written by D.E. Stevenson, Dorothy Emily Stevenson, who was a first cousin once removed of Robert Louis Stevenson. It's set in rural Scotland, the borders. It's about a woman named Anna and her daughters. They are from London. The girls have all grown up in London. They are all older teenagers. And their father dies, Anna's husband, and it turns out that he had not saved any money. So while they seemed to be rolling in the dough, there was nothing that accumulated for them. And so they moved back to Anna's old hometown in rural Scotland. And it's really about their life there, the people they meet, the relationships they have, the jobs they find. Well plotted, well written. The characters are pretty much all likable and enjoyable, with a couple of exceptions. But even those, in the end, I think you come to really like everybody. Like I said, it's cozy, not much adventure, not even much conflict, just things that happen and the ways that regular people deal with regular everyday problems. And I loved it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The other thing I finished was a short story by Robert Louis Stevenson. I have it in this, even read that? I read it there. Novels and Stories by Robert Louis Stevenson. The story is called Thrawn Janet. Not one I'd ever read before or was even familiar with. It's historical fiction, as Robert Louis Stevenson tends to write. So written in the 1890s, about a place in rural Scotland, set in the early 18th century. A young minister moves to this town to be the pastor at the church. And one of the first things that happens is he has a housekeeper, and she is accused of witchcraft. And there's a mob that is doing those witch trials in the terrible ways that we have all heard about and read about. And he is able to save his housekeeper, Janet, the title character. And once he saves her from being a witch, all kinds of things happen. This is a horror short story. This is supernatural. It is tense and eerie, and I loved it. I went with 4.5 stars on this. Maybe it's a little higher. I did post some poetry readings this week. As usual, I posted Henry Herbert Nibs and his poem Boomer Johnson about Camp Cook. It came from this particular Anthology of Cowboy Poetry. I think this was the first one that the Western Folklife Center, who hosts the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering, I think this was the first anthology they put together. Hal Cannon edited that. And Henry Herbert Nibs, great poet, a lot of fun. That's here on the channel and watchable. I also, in a separate video for Victober, Victorian literature, the bulk of the Victorian literature in my collection is by Robert Louis Stevenson. I have a few other Victorian writers here on the shelf, but I was going to say there's an imbalance, but there isn't. There's just the right amount of Robert Louis Stevenson. Maybe it's a little shy. So I read a poem that I have in this really fine collection. It's called A Child's Garden of Verses, but it contains a lot of other poetry. Not all the poetry that Stevenson wrote, but a lot of it. This is from the Sears Juvenile Classics collection, published by Sears Company of Akron, Ohio, I think. I read Heather Ale, which is a retelling in verse about an Irish king who invades Scotland and is just killing everybody. But there is that beautiful heather, and there's a way to make ale from the heather, and this Irish king wants the ale, but nobody knows how to make it. And so he finds the last two remaining people in this part of the world and tries to coax them in not really nice ways to give him the recipe for heather ale. Really enjoyable poem, and I really like the way Stevenson mixes in Scottish folklore, Celtic folklore, and Celtic history, Scottish history in particular, into his works. So that was it's a good poem. Again, it is on the channel in a separate video. What else? I posted a review of Death Comes for the Archbishop by Willa Cather. A nice in-depth review of a really fine book. I hope you'll, if you want to watch the review, that's great. I hope you'll pick up a Willa Cather novel here and there. So what am I reading now? I have started into another novel by Robert Louis Stevenson because it is Victober, and I do have more Victorian literature by Robert Louis Stevenson than anybody else. This is The Master of Ballantrae. I have not read this one, and I'm just getting started, and I'm already enjoying it. Again, more historical fiction. It starts at least in 1745, the war where Bonnie Prince Charlie has come back to claim his throne in Scotland, and all the things that happen around Culloden and Falkirk and other places. Next, after I read The Master of Ballantrae, I am going to read another Victorian author. So I do have more than just Robert Louis Stevenson. I also have H.G. Wells. I got this nice two-novella volume. I have read The Time Machine before, but I have not read The Invisible Man. And so that's next on my list, The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells, continuing the Victorian literature in October. I only had one new book acquisition this week. It was found by someone I know who understands what I like. Found this copy of Frank Norris's The Octopus. It's published by Bentley, Robert Bentley. It was published in 1971. Nothing spectacular about this, but it is another copy of The Octopus. You can see the dust jacket has a lot of wear on it. But this was found not just at a thrift store, but at the thrift store outlet, which is where many of the items from one of our chains of thrift stores here, where they funnel things for kind of their last chance at being picked up. This book, 50 cents. That is the week. That's what I read, what I'm reading, some of the things that I posted, particularly the poetry readings, the reviews, what I'm reading now and what's coming up next, and the one book that was added to my collection this week. Thanks so much for watching. I will have some of these individual videos linked in the discussion below, and I'm looking forward to another great week of reading. I wish the same for you. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate everybody who watches. I appreciate all the likes and comments. So thank you. And until next time, my name is Greg, and this is Ghost Readers in the Sky.